9 months, we have been experiencing what for most of us is the greatest challenge to our community in our lifetime. We are worried about our health, our parnasa, certainly in the long term, our children's education, and general well-being. So we would think that our davening would be really heartfelt with serious kavanah. In our shuls, we would feel the intensity as if it was the Yomim Noraim. But strangely, that doesn't seem to be the case. The atmosphere in our shuls seems to be dull and muted. I just imagine if someone would come into our shul who has been out of communication with the world for the last year, would they be able to tell from our tefilos that there was something going on? Of course, they would see the masks and the social distancing, and that so many people haven't yet returned to minyanim. But if they were blindfolded, can they tell just from the tefilos alone that we are in an eis tzara? Unfortunately, I don't think that is the case. I'd like to discuss why that is true and to share some ideas that can make our tefilos more meaningful. The Gemara in Bracha says that Rav Chia bar Abba was sick, and Rav Yochanan went to visit him. And Rav Yochanan asked him, Chavivin alecha yisurim. Do you appreciate yisurim? Do you appreciate afflictions? Because after all, we grow from our challenges. And Rav Chia answered, Lo hein v'lo scharim. Although I recognize that there was what to gain and grow from yisurim, from suffering, I don't want it, and I will forgo the rewards and benefits. So Rav Yochanan told him, give me your hand. And Rav Yochanan took Rav Chia's hand, and he davened for Rav Chia, and Rav Chia got better, and Rav Chia recovered. Then the Gemara relates another story. This time it's Rav Yochanan who is sick, and Rav Chanina comes to visit him. And the same conversation ensues. Rav Chanina asks Rav Yochanan, Chavivin alecha yisurim, do you appreciate the yisurim? And Rav Yochanan says, Lo hein v'lo scharan, I don't want them, I'll forgo them, and I'll forgo the rewards. And Rav Chanina takes Rav Yochanan's hand, and Rav Chanina davens for Rav Yochanan, and Rav Yochanan recovers. So the Gemara asks, in the first story, Rav Yochanan was able to daven for the recovery of Rav Chia, and it worked. So if that's the case, when Rav Yochanan got sick, why did Rav Yochanan not just daven for himself? Why did he need Rav Chanina to daven for him? And the Gemara answers that ein chavush matir atzmai mibeis hasurim. A chavush, a captive, cannot release himself from prison. He needs the help of somebody else. So when Rav Yochanan was well, he was able to focus and to concentrate and really daven on behalf of his friend, and his tefilos were accepted. But when he himself was weak and sick, he did not have the strength and clarity to daven properly, and he needed Rav Chanina to daven for him. Now just imagine if the virus was only in Eretz Yisrael and it was not affecting America. I believe our shuls would be packed and the tefilos would be said with a strong sense of urgency and be very intense. And I know this is true because there have been lesser tsaras which took place in Eretz Yisrael, and we have really risen to the occasion, and our tefilos have been real and sincere and a very strong response. But now the virus is raging not only in Eretz Yisrael, but affecting us as well. And for some reason, our tefilos are lackluster and routine. And the reason is because ein chavush matir atzmai mibeis hasurim. When we are experiencing our difficult times, we're down, life is draining and confusing, and it's hard to focus. But we have to realize that in this case, there is no one else to daven for us, because the entire world is chavush b'beis hasurim. The entire world in some form or other is experiencing COVID. And in that case, that thought has to propel us and to recognize, im ein ani li, mi li. If I don't daven for myself, there is no one to daven for me. With the idea of ein breira, in this case, I have no choice. I have no one else to daven for me, and therefore I have to marshal my strength and to focus and to daven for ourselves. But of course, not just to daven for ourselves, but for our community, the entire Klal Yisrael, and the entire world, because ein breira, there is no one else. So it is difficult, but necessary to daven. However, there is something specific about this Eis Tzara, and especially at this point where we are right now, that makes it easier to daven. Now, although we've just finished Hanukkah, I want to fast forward to the story of Purim. So Haman makes a decree to murder all the Jews, and Klal Yisrael seem to only have one hope, that Esther will go to Achashverosh, reveal who she is, and beg for mercy on behalf of the Jews. But the truth is that's really an outside shot. First, Esther has no permission to go to enter the chamber of Achashverosh. And in the rules which existed then, she probably would be killed before she even has a chance to open up her mouth. Second, even if Achashverosh gave Esther a time to talk, there's no reason to think that he should listen to what Esther is saying and save Klal Yisrael. Well, Klal Yisrael fasts and davens for 3 days and 3 nights, and we all know the end of the story, and we celebrate the happy ending. But I actually left out an important part of the story. Between those 3 days where Klal Yisrael were davening, Haman comes early in the morning to Achashverosh's palace, and he wants to ask Achashverosh for permission to hang Mordechai. Instead of getting permission to hang Mordechai, Haman is told to lead Mordechai in a horse throughout the streets of Shushan and to give honor to Mordechai for years before saving the king. And the Vilna Gaon asks a question. Every detail that is recorded in the Megillah was orchestrated as part of Hashem's hashgacha, and it was part of the nes that Klal Yisrael was saved. If that's the case, why is this important? Why is this an important detail that Haman would go to the palace and have to give that honor to Mordechai? What would be if that never happened? The party happened at the end of 3 days. Esther reveals who she is, and Achashverosh again loves Esther and kills Haman. Why is that detail necessary for the nes? And the Vilna Gaon explains that Hashem wanted to show Bnei Yisrael the possibility of a Yeshua. He wanted to show Bnei Yisrael that Hashem is with them, and Haman may fall and Mordechai may be saved. Rav Mata Pogomansky, who was one of the Gedolim at the time of the Second World War, asks, why does Hashem want to show that Yeshua? Why was it necessary for Hashem to give us a preview of the happy ending of the story? And Rav Mata says a very, very important insight. He says that when we don't see any hope, when we don't see a way out of a situation, it's almost impossible to really daven properly. Yes, halachically we are required to daven, afilu cherev chada munachas al tzavoro. Even if there's a sword on our neck, we're still supposed to turn to the Ribono Shel Olam in tefillah, but it's very, very hard. He said, Haman was so powerful and in such control of the palace that the Jews really saw no way out of the decree. They didn't see a glimmer of hope. They could daven, but to really daven properly would have been very hard. Hashem wanted to bring the Yeshua of Purim, but the Yeshua had to happen through tefillah. It had to happen as a response of the 3 days of davening that Klal Yisrael committed to do. And for it to happen through tefillah, that had to be sincere and heartfelt tefilos. So Hashem said, I'm going to show Bnei Yisrael the possibility of a Yeshua. You think Haman is all-powerful? He's not. Look, Haman's leading Mordechai on the horse. When Bnei Yisrael saw that, they said, Haman could fall. Still needs tefillah. Yeshua certainly hasn't come, but at least they saw a glimmer of hope, and now they're able to daven, and then they davened properly, and the real Yeshua happened at the end. Ramato discusses, he was in the Kovna ghetto, and he discusses how the tefilos looked while they were in the Kovna ghetto. And he said, yes, they davened, but they did not see any hope. They did not see how anybody could save them at that point. And the tefilos lacked sincerity. Ramato said, imagine if one day the German commander would be leading the Kovna Rav, the Dvar Avam, on a horse through the ghetto. Then they really would have davened, because then they would see a possibility of a Yeshua. Today, it is easier to daven because we do see hope. We know the vaccine is coming out, and God willing, it should be successful. But we should not be foolish enough to think that the vaccine is a guarantee. Of course, so many things, God forbid, could go wrong, but it is enough to allow us to have hope and therefore to daven. In addition, if we think about it, we see so much of the Yad Hashem throughout this difficult period. It could have been so much worse. In Tachnun every day we start with the pasuk by Yomer David El Gad. David said to the Navi, God, Nifla Nabi Ad Hashem, and we fall in the hands of Hashem, Ki Rabim Rachamav. Even if Hashem is punishing me, but He has such Rachmanos, but Ubiyad Adam Ala Pola, don't let me fall in the hands of man. And the Gemara explains that David HaMelech was given a choice of punishments. Either he'll be given over to the hands of his enemy, or there will be a plague. And David HaMelech said, I choose a plague. Over Klal Yisrael should face a plague over Klal Yisrael being overrun by our enemies. Because a plague is the direct Yad of Hashem, and there'll be Rachmanis. Even though there'll be Midas Hadin, it'll be given with Rachmanis. But once we're given over to the hands of our enemy will not show us any Rachmanis at all. Yes, we're living through a time of Midas Hadin, but at the same time we see Rabim Rachamav, we see tremendous Rachmanis of the Ribono Shel Olam. It was predicted that the economy would crash and we would have so many people out of jobs, not able to support their families. And Baruch Hashem, that for the most part, the economy is held up. It's not complete Hester Panim. It could be, in many ways, as we know, so much worse as if we read about other plagues that have happened in history. And this obligates to give Hodah to the Ribono Shel Olam, to thank Hashem for the good. And at the same time, we're giving Hodah to the Ribono Shel Olam to beg Him for a Yeshua. Let's look at Rachel Imenu. When she had her first son, she named him Yosef for 2 reasons. First, she said, Asaf Hashem es cherpasi. Hashem has ended my mortification. And then she said, Yosef Hashem li ben acher. Hashem, give me another son. It's a combination of Hodah and Bakasha. I give Hodah to the Ribono Shel Olam. I recognize the good Hashem has done to me. And I say, if I can recognize the good, I can give it Bakasha. I can ask for more. Hashem has given me 1 son. I'm asking Him for another one. Hashem has, throughout the Midas Hadin, has still shown Rachamim. We can ask the Ribono Shel Olam for more Rachamim to end this Magefa. In Tehillim, it says, Lamnatseach mizmor leDavid yancha Hashem b'yom tzara. David HaMelech says, answer me when I call out in time of distress. But the Medrash gives a second meaning to the pasuk. The Medrash says, Yancha Hashem b'yom tzara, answer me, the Ribono Shel Olam, even if I only call out in time of distress. Even if when things are going well, my tefilos were inadequate, I had no kavanah in my tefilos, or perhaps I didn't daven at all, and it's only because there's a tzara that I'm turning to the Ribono Shel Olam to daven. It's only because there's a tzara that I'm really having kavanah, but still Yancha Hashem, still Hashem should answer me and not ignore my tefilos. And the Medrash explains, why would the Ribono Shel Olam only answer us if we're really only calling out to him at a time of tzara? Why should he answer us if we don't call out to him when things are going well? And the Medrash brings a mashal of a mother and a daughter who are estranged, and they have to move apart. The mother lives in the upstairs of the house, the daughter lives in the downstairs, and there's no communication between each other. One day the daughter is giving birth, and she's having severe labor pains, and she's crying out in pain. And when the mother hears the daughter cry out, the mother starts crying too. And her friends ask her, why are you crying? What do you care? You have nothing to do with your daughter. And the Medrash says the mother answers, Biti b'tzar, my daughter is going through pain. So afal pisha hichisa osi, even though she's made me so upset and she's angered me, but eina yachal lispol tzarasa, I'm still her mother, and I can't bear to hear her cry out. And we know as parents, if our child calls us for help, we will respond right away, even if we are angry at our child. And Hashem is an Av Harachamim. So if we cry out, even if it's only b'tzar, Hashem will respond. But that's one level. But we don't want our tefilos to be just that. We don't want our tefilos to just be that we're calling out at the time of tzara, and when things get better, we'll be silent. And the Drasha Saran explains that a real, genuine tefillah be'ez tzara is that we're not just asking for life to go back to normal, and then we can forget about the tzara and go move on as if it never happened. But a true tefillah be'ez tzara is we turn to the Ribono Shel Olam and we say that we express an understanding that I have to grow and change because of this tzara. And I say that when things get back to normal, I will have used what I went through to make changes in my everyday life. I will listen to the tzara. I will allow it to teach me, and I will follow its message, and commit to make changes and implement them when things go back to normal. So what does this have to do with tefillah? How does tefillah accomplish this? And how does this connect to tefillah? Yes, we have to grow from a tzara, and we want to go back to a better normal. But how does that connect to tefillah, and what does it have to do with tefillah? And this can be done in two ways. There's another Gemara in Brachos that tells a story. There was a chazan who took very long to daven, and nothing changes. People complained. And Rabbi Eliezer, who's the Rav, then said, why are you complaining about the chazan? He certainly didn't take longer than Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, we know, davened for 40 days and for 40 nights after the Egel to save Klal Yisrael. The Moshe could daven for 40 days. The chazan can daven for an hour. Don't complain. Then the Gemara brings another story that the next time the chazan took very short. Davened very fast. And again, people complained. Now, you would think it's probably a different group of people, but any rabbi would tell you, no, it's the same people. The same people who complain when it goes slow, complain when it goes fast. And this time, Rabbi Eliezer told them, why are you complaining? The chazan didn't daven any faster than Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he had to daven for his sister Miriam, who had saras, said a tefillah of 5 words, 5 short words. Kel na, refa na la. The Rebbeinu Shalom give her a refuah. So sometimes Moshe Rabbeinu made a tefillah arucha, a long tefillah, and he spent 40 days and 40 nights davening. And sometimes Moshe Rabbeinu made a short tefillah kitzara of 5 words. And there are those who say a remez. When we stood by the Yam Suf with the Egyptians coming from behind us to kill us, Moshe Rabbeinu started davening, and Hashem told him, this is not the place to daven. Just move. Go into the Yam Suf, and a miracle is going to happen. And the pasuk says, Ma titzak alai. Why are you crying now before me? The word ma, mem, hey, is a remez. It's not the time to make a long tefillah of mem, of 40 days. It's not the time to make a short tefillah of hey, of 5 words. This, for whatever reason, is not the time to daven. But we see there's a concept of a long tefillah. Sometimes the tefillah requires many, many days of davening over and over again. And sometimes we only need to make a short tefillah. But the Gemara doesn't tell us when is it appropriate to make a long tefillah and when is it appropriate to make a short tefillah. I saw an explanation from Rav Kook, and he explains as follows. Sometimes we go through a tzara and we feel the tzara has already changed us. We feel we've grown, we've integrated and implemented the lessons of the tzara. In that case, I only need to make a short tefillah. Because the role of the tefillah is to articulate the lessons which we already know exist. If I stand in front of the Rebbeinu Shalom and I tell Hashem, this is what I experienced, this is what I've learned, this is what I'm doing differently, that's all I have to say. That's what makes it real, if I can stand and say that in front of the Rebbeinu Shalom. I only need then a tefillah kitzara, a short tefillah. At the beginning of our COVID, the first Purim and Pesach, when we quarantined, there were so many beautiful ideas which we heard from different drashas of how we can improve and what message we could take from these difficult times. How our davening has to be different, how our respect for our shuls have to be different, how our friendships have to be much more meaningful and real, how the way we spend time with our children, with our spouses, with our parents, with our families are going to be different. How our smachut will be much less wasting money, but in a focus on a real simcha and what it really counts. Now, have we really implemented these changes? Have we really changed? So if we have, then we only need to make a tefillah kitzara. We need a short tefillah. We can tell the Rebbeinu Shalom, look, I've changed. I'm a different person. I'm ready to go back to normal. But I think for many of us, these were ideas which we talked about, which resonated, and we appreciated, but we've actually found it hard to implement them. And when things did in the summer go back to normal, we didn't really feel the changes really stuck. And if we are one of those people, it's not enough to make a tefillah kitzara. Our tefillah plays a different role. Because in that case, the tefillah is not just expressing the changes, but it's the tefillah itself which is part and it plays an important role in actually making the change. If we stand in front of the Rebbeinu Shalom, asking him day in and day out for Rahmanas, and we really mean it, that itself changes us. But if it's the tefillah that has to change us, it's a process, and it requires a long tefillah. It requires many days and weeks of continued davening with real kavanah, which can bring about a change. But how does that work? How does the tefillah change us? I think there's a couple of reasons why a real tefillah b'kavana makes us into different and better people. First, if we stand in front of the Ribono Shel Olam and we ask Him for our needs, so that deepens our emunah in Hashem and in Hashem's hashgacha. If we're asking for Hashem, please give me this, it means reinforces our belief that everything comes from the Yad Hashem, everything comes with Hashem's hashgacha, and everything happens for a reason. And actually the Ramban makes this point. The Ramban says that there's a mitzvahs aseh to daven when there is an eis tzara. Even the Ramban holds that daily tefilos are only midrabanan, but be'eis tzara we are commanded of the Torah to daven. Right now, there's a mitzvahs aseh, according to the Ramban, to daven for a Yeshua. And the Ramban explains why is there a mitzvah be'eis tzara to daven? Because he says davening in an eis tzara expresses and demonstrates our belief shehu yisparach shomei tefillah. Hashem is listening to our tefillas, v'hu hamatzil mitzaros, and Hashem is the one saving us from tzaros. Every time we daven be'eis tzara, we're reinforcing that belief that the Ribono Shel Olam is paying attention, the Ribono Shel Olam is being mashkiach on us, and the Ribono Shel Olam is there to help us. We can become with a stronger emunah out of davening day in and day out. The Rambam makes a different point. The Rambam says tefillah be'eis tzara is part of the tshuva process. It's part of getting us to change. Because when we turn and we feel we're standing in front of the Ribono Shel Olam, and if I really feel in my Shmon Esrei I'm talking to Hashem, it causes me to think and reevaluate life and my goals and my missions and my priorities in life. If I'm standing in front of Hashem, I feel that humility, and then I question, am I living up to what I really know deep down my mission in life? And if I'm not, what can I do to improve and to make sure that I prioritize what's important and ignore what's not? So that's the second point to tefillah. Tefillah, really standing and talking to Hashem, gets me to change. A third point, part of tefillah is hodah. Part of tefillah, an important part of tefillah, we don't just ask things from the Ribono Shel Olam, but we express appreciation for what the Ribono Shel Olam gave us. And the more we thank Hashem, and the more we really mean it, the more we appreciate the things which we have. If we get up in the morning and we say the Birkas HaShachar, the brachos which we say thanking Hashem step by step for being able to get dressed and face our day, walk, see, and we give 1 or 2 seconds of thought to each tefillah, we have so much appreciation for our sight, for our health, for the mobility, and that leads to a much deeper appreciation of life. So that's the third point. We have an appreciation of life, an appreciation of the gifts which Hashem gave us. A fourth point, the Sefer Hasidim say, is that when we daven, we never daven only for ourselves. We daven for others too, for our community. And davening for others actually causes a greater sense of being part of a tzibur. You know, there's a Gemara that says, Kol mi shehispalal al chaveiro, v'hu tzarech l'oso davar, hu nana tchila. If you daven, if you have a tzara, you have something difficult, a difficulty in life, and you daven not just for yourself, but you daven for another person who's facing that same tzara, that's a skula that Hashem answers your tefillah. You're able to take your mind off your own pain and see that pain in others and daven for others. The Ribono Shel Olam looks at you and says, I want to answer, I want to alleviate your pain. So there's an organization that pairs people up. They say, okay, you have this tzara, there's somebody else with the same thing. We'll give that person your name, and you'll take their name, and you'll daven for the other person. And it feels like a little bit of a gimmick. Okay, I take the person's name, but I'm really davening for myself. I'm not really davening for the other person. But if you try it, it actually works. Because once you start davening for the other person, and you really put yourself in the other person's shoes. And you really start thinking about the tzara, and you really mean your tefilos. So perhaps in the beginning, you only took the name because you really wanted to daven for yourself. But ultimately, you end up feeling the pain of other people and thinking about others. The Gemara in Brachos tells us that you're supposed to daven in a room which has windows in it. That's a halacha. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. The room should have windows. And the Rishash asks that in the shuls in Vilna, which were built by Gedolei Olam, they didn't have windows. How could it be that the great city of Vilna would build shuls not in compliance with the rules of the Gemara? So the Rishash suggests that perhaps this halacha is only referring to a person who's davening b'yechidus, not a person who's davening b'tzibur. If a person is davening b'yechidus, he should make sure to daven in a room with windows. But a person who's davening b'tzibur, it's not necessary. But the Rishash says he doesn't really know why that should make a difference. The halacha is you should have windows. What difference does it make if you're davening b'yechidus or if you're davening b'tzibur? I heard an explanation from Rav Kook, and he says, why should there be a halacha that you should have windows when you daven? And he says, when we come to daven, we all have our needs. We all have a list of what we want the Rebbeinu Shalom to answer us. And we begin davening about ourselves. But the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want us to just daven about ourselves. He wants us to think about others too. So if we stand by a window, we see outside. We see there's a world outside, we see there's other people, and we start thinking other people also have needs. I'm going to include them in my tefillah. And that's why you should daven in a room which has a window. But when you're in a shul, you don't need a window to see other people. You look around you, you see other people. I know this person has this need, that person has that tzara, and that itself gets me to daven for other people without the need of having a window. That's why in a shul, you don't have to have a window. But in the privacy of your home, when you only see yourself, you should have a window to be able to see and think about other people. If we daven 3 days b'kavana and we're thinking about other people, we become people who have a much deeper care or concern about other people. So those are the 4 things that the process of tefillah can do. It builds emunah, it causes me to think about life, to think about priorities in life, to think about my mission in life. It gives me a much more deeper appreciation for the gifts that I've given, and it causes me to think about others. And that's the process that a real tefillah, if we daven be'ez tzara, day in and day out, to real kavana, will emerge from this as different people, and it's the tefillah itself which causes us to be different. And that's what the Ran says, that the reason why tefillah works be'ez tzara, I'm not just asking Rebbeinu Shalom, give me this, but it's the tefillah which is causing me to become a different person who now deserves the new thing which Hashem is going to be giving him. When Yitzchak Avinu married Rivka, it became apparent that Rivka was an akara. She was unable to have children. And Yitzchak davened 20 years that he should have a child through Rivka, 20 years of davening. And the Drasha Saran asks that Yitzchak didn't just happen to meet Rivka and married her, but Rivka was sent direct from the Rebbeinu Shalom to Yitzchak clearly as an answer to the tefilos of Avraham Avinu and the tefilos of Eliezer. This was meant to be Yitzchak's wife, and Rivka was meant to be one of the imahos. So if so, why did Hashem make Rivka an akara? She was meant to have children. And the Drasha Saran says, quoting Chazal, yes, that's the case. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu mis'ave l'tfilosin shel tzadikim. Yes, Rivka was destined to have a child, but Hashem wanted Yitzchak to daven, because Yitzchak became the great Yitzchak Avinu through those 20 years of tefillah, 20 years of dveikus in Hashem, 20 years of strengthening his emunah, of crying to the Rebbeinu Shalom, made Yitzchak who he was. That's the path of tefillah to change it, which the tefillah itself changes us and make us into better people, into better Jews. Let's go back to the mashal that the Medrash gave of a tefilah be'ez tzara, that the mother who's estranged from her daughter, and her daughter is in pain and crying out. But it's important to note the mashal the Medrash gave is not that the daughter was sick, but the daughter was in labor. The daughter was about to have a child. And by using that example, the Medrash is teaching us that ultimately a tzara is a leda. Ultimately, a tzara is Hashem wants us to give birth to something new. And it's clear to us that the tzara we're going through, Hashem wants something from us. Hashem wants to bring a change to the world. Perhaps it's not clear what the change is, but Hashem wants us to bring a change. And we know from Chazal that the change is brought about through tefillah, through the hard work of davening day in, day out, day in, day out. 40 days of tefillah, night and day of Moshe Rabbeinu, 3 times a day, which we come to shul to daven with real kavanah, can bring about the change. And with Hashem, the Yibon Hashem should quickly listen to all our tefilos and end this tzara and bring us back to a new and better normal. Thank you.